A very good Sunday morning to everyone on the 24th of October, 2021. The Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by Wholesale Holiday Lighting by Giannini, your complete holiday lighting specialist, meeting all your decorating needs, whether you want to have your home decorated for the holidays or you're doing this as a business or you want this to be your business. Let them know. They're at 162 Ocean Avenue in Lindenhurst, New York, and their telephone number is 631-957-5106. They got a lot of stuff in stock. Your house will look sensational, okay? The website is liholidaylighting.com. Also brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware. Salt season is here, folks, at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, 631-756-1125, the phone number there. I spoke to the owner this morning, Judine Federici, who told me that in spite of the supply chain shortages and they've got and everything else going on, they've got plenty of supply. So give them a call, 631-756-1125, and the website is omnitruevalue.com. So, Mr. Rayo, on this crisp, business-like Sunday morning, we have a ton of stuff going on. You got a nor'easter, technically, for Tuesday into Wednesday. You've got another system at the end of the week. You have severe weather risk reaching up to just north of New York City for Monday, although I kind of think that might be just a smidge overstated on the marginal risk side anyway. But lots to talk about today. We got the long range to talk about. We didn't talk about the NOAA winter forecast, which came out Thursday. So many things on the agenda on this Sunday morning.
Yes, and before I get fully into this, let me just say that Joe Rayo also is trying to recover from what appears to be a rather significant head cold, Joe, and cough. So I may let you do a lot of the talking today. As you can hear, I'm a little clogged still, but we do have a lot of stuff going on. Quite a change from when we last parted company here on Wednesday, and we didn't have much to talk about for a number of days. It's been rather quiet, but you're absolutely right. A nor'easter possible, no, not possible, but probable. Likely here for Tuesday into Tuesday into Wednesday. And then another system, which will actually not be a nor'easter, but will be just inland of our area. It appears for Friday and Saturday of next week, bringing us more significant precipitation. And indeed, we do have the threat of a rather large amount of rainfall. Depending upon what model you're looking at, we could see out of this first system anywhere from 2 to, I saw, the European was suggesting maybe crazy amounts, like 4 or 5 inches out of this. Mm-hmm. So it looks like we're finally going to be getting wet here after a bit of dry weather over these past several days, over the last week or so.
Who knows? We could wind up with above normal rainfall for the month, and it all is going to come in a handful of days this week. The other thing I was thinking about was the fact. Well, 2 things. One is the position of the low, and also where the high is to the north. It's pretty far north. The gradient is tight offshore, but it's not tight. It's not overly tight once you move away from the coast. So a couple of people were asking me about wind issues. I think the usual places, like if you're on the Jersey Shore, if you're on, the Long Island, South Shore, South Coastal New England, Southeastern New England, you're going to probably blow away with gales. And it certainly will probably get gusty just inland, but I'm not seeing any kind of crazy widespread wind event out of this.
Yeah, it looks like. I haven't even had a chance yet to look at the latest NAM Foos run. I usually look at that and try to gauge what kind of winds we're looking at by looking at the scenario. Let me see here, 2412Z. And, Joe, the winds aren't overly strong until we get to, midday and afternoon on Tuesday. And it looks like, from what I'm looking at here, we might see, let's say at LaGuardia, winds gusting to 35 to 40, maybe higher, and probably not quite as strong as you go inland. So it will be a pretty stiff breeze coming up our way. Looks like mostly from the north and northeast on Tuesday, but nothing crazy, nothing that, you start talking about power lines coming down and damage to tree limbs and whatever. It does look significant, but it does not look like anything that will cause a really terrible amount. Although I will point out also that over a 18-hour, 612, 6 hours, 102. So according to the FOOS, the latest FOOS for LaGuardia, 1.02 inches falling from 8 a.m. on Tuesday to 2 p.m. on Tuesday, and then an additional 0.46 inches from 2 p.m. on Tuesday to 8 p.m. on Tuesday, a grand total for that period, for that 12-hour period, of approximately just over 2 inches. So, yeah, lots of rain, some gusty winds. Tuesday looks like a rather miserable, let's put the emphasis on that word, miserable kind of day.
Right. It's going to be very hard for weather conditions to improve after the first low because of the fact that the flow is going to be onshore-ish. The low is going to take forever to move out of the way. And then just finally, when you get to the point where it moves out of the way, the next system comes in at the end of the week. All of this, by the way, being fed in by what's going on in the West. We pointed out on our last show last Wednesday how we were getting wave after wave coming in from a storm in the Gulf of Alaska. Now that the bulk of that storm is actually now coming into to the West Coast for tonight and Monday, and they're going to get some big snows in the Sierra Nevadas out of this, measured in feet. The rainfall is going to be also there, several to many inches. So you kind of have this. Yeah, we have this pattern that all of this got started, by the way, a week ago when we finally got the ridge to break down and we had the weather front that moved by some areas that got the severe weather with that. But that started the ball rolling. So you basically kind of moved the chess pieces around. You shifted the block to a little bit more northeast of where it was, and you left the West Coast alone because you still have a trough along, troughing along and off the West Coast. That's sending weather systems eastward. And now, of course, with that ridge logjam broke down, you're getting these systems coming east, and they're behaving the way they would behave in blocks where they try to go northeast but can't, and then they get shoved southeastward and they redevelop along the mid-Atlantic seaboard or off the southern New England coast. And this is how the NAO could work in the wintertime, depending on other factors. And of course, there's still no real cold air around. That may change in the longer range, by the way. There's some things going on in the stratosphere that I thought that are very interesting, and we'll get into that. But definitely a busy, a gloom and doom type of week.
Yeah, I hope everybody gets a chance to enjoy this morning, because this morning might be the nicest stretch of weather we have over the next 5, 6, 7 days.
What do you think about that marginal risk for tomorrow? I'll put it up with the SPC map here. They've got a marginal risk of severe weather. This is on their day 2 outlook. It hasn't really changed since yesterday. There we go. I'm sorry. Just let me get the map up here. Taking an extra day off sometimes throws me for a loop as far as the technicals are concerned with this. But they got marginal risk up to western Long Island and just about, just touching Orange and Rockland counties in New York State, and then all of New Jersey, all of PA. And then you got this big area of slight risk in Western Virginia, Western North Carolina, Western South Carolina, Northeast Georgia, which includes me, Eastern Tennessee, Eastern Kentucky. And by the way, the tornado risk is in that slight risk zone where they have 2% and wind risk, that base a 5% wind risk. I don't know. We're going to have some decent daytime heating tomorrow because there's a warm front that's going to go to our north, and then it's going to sort of collapse when the low starts to reform. I just don't know how much severe weather you're going to be able to grind out of this. I tend to think if it happens, an isolated cell here and there, yeah, but widespread activity, no.
Now, Joe, the on the again referring back to the NAM FOOS, our lifted index or lifted indices are not going to get much better than -3. That suggests to me, yeah, there'll be thunderstorms around, but nothing, earth shattering or earth shaking, so to speak. Now, it's possible that as we progress into tonight and tomorrow, new data coming in, maybe the warm front moves a little further north and places us more in a moderate, humid, sticky airflow, that we might see a few notable thunderbusters out there. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm surprised that we're actually making it. I would have thought general thunderstorms was a good bet. Marginal risk, that might be pushing the envelope just a little bit, but again, we'll see.
Yeah.
Things may change tonight and tomorrow.
All right, Michael McGuire is our early super chat hit. Thank you, Michael. And yes, you are under a slight risk tomorrow in western North Carolina, and I'm in that slight risk zone as well. I'm looking forward to after this weather front goes by because we've got some nice. It's going to get cool here, probably a couple of days after the second system goes by late this week. Probably next weekend, I'll be sitting here with temperatures in the daytime not getting out of the 50s, which will be quite nice. And that'll be going into the peak here of leaf season, by the way. The weather watches and warnings got more than what we've seen in quite a while. Flash flood watches up for northern Illinois, including Chicago and the northwestern third of Indiana and northwestern Ohio. The East Coast right now, there's really nothing up and down the East Coast as far as watches and warnings are concerned. And of course, in the West, we've got a lot of Northern California in flash flood watches. And also, you can see some of the little red boxes there in Northern California where there are already some flash flood warnings and winter storm warnings in that pink shading in the Sierra Nevadas. A lot of areas either under a wind advisory or a high wind warning out in the western U.S. And you can see storm warnings in the purple off the coastal waters of Washington and Oregon. There's a lot of Pacific energy there that's coming east. The piece that's doing Tuesday storm is already in play as it moves in through the middle Mississippi Valley today. And this is where the Storm Prediction Center for today, and I'll just back it up a box. I actually, by the way, you know what? I want to go back. I'm going to go to their. I noticed that they started doing this, but if you click on, where the hazards are listed on the bottom to get to the map, and you click on the on enhanced, like I am now, the map it doesn't do. It's funny because Joe, when I do this on my phone, the map comes up with the counties, which I thought was kind of odd. But let me click on the counties. You never thought there were so many counties in the eastern part of the United States now, did you? But this is what it looks like. Enhanced risk. I'm going to take the counties off. And let's see what it looks like with the interstates. No, that's useless. Okay, so enhanced risk of severe weather today, covering almost all of Missouri except the northwestern and western parts of the state, southern Illinois, northern Arkansas, eastern Oklahoma. I mean, it's a big area of enhanced risk. The slight risk is around that, and of course, you see the marginal risk around that. Also, you don't see this too often, but there's a marginal risk for severe weather in parts of coastal Washington and Oregon, interestingly enough. And they have a 10% tornado risk today from northwestern Arkansas northeastward into south central Illinois. That includes St. Louis, by the way, in that 10% tornado risk. And in the black hatched area, I believe that's for winds in excess of 65 knots. Wind, tornado, and hail risk also 30% or higher in terms of the hail risk as well. So this could be a pretty solid severe weather outbreak that we see in the middle Mississippi Valley later on today.
We don't often see 10%. We usually are accustomed to 2 and every once in a while 5%. 10% is something, that doesn't happen very often. Certainly, I think up here, we've only seen 10% like once in the time that we've been doing Joe and Joe, but in our part of the country. So yeah, that'll be some place to watch carefully later today and into the early part of tonight.
Yeah, no question. And let's look at the rainfall from WPC. They got that. I think that's the 4-inch patch area there. That's in the northern half of New Jersey, throughout all of southern and central New England, of 4 inches or more of rainfall. And now they've kind of pushed the 2.5-inch line down to northern Delaware, northeastern Maryland, also into parts of western Maryland. And then the amounts kind of start to tail off as you go further south, where the rains will be a little more convective in nature. Also, you see that stripe from southern Iowa, northernmost Missouri, across Illinois and Indiana of 3 inches or more, and that speaks to the flash flood watches that are up there. And as we've seen for many days now in the West, this started last week because they've been raining pretty much since the middle part of last week there, on and off. But total rainfall, an additional several, I've just been kind of saying several to many inches. As far as the rainfall is concerned, for central and northern California, up the coast of Oregon and Washington, the amounts kind of drop off a bit as you go inland, but still not too shabby in parts of Iowa, Utah, and northern Nevada in terms of rainfall. And I brought up the snowfall maps here for the Sierra Nevadas with some prints, Joe, in the low 30s, some big amounts there in some of the higher peaks. And I'm sure I don't have the highest peak number here, but there'll probably be somebody at the top of some mountain out there that'll wind up with 3 or 4 feet out of this. I mean, this is pretty sizable. This is a pretty sizable snowfall that's occurring, but it's narrow in nature. So I'm wondering whether, the fact that you don't have, this is so, this is really early in the season. So the fact that you don't have a lot of cold air is probably going to keep the scope of the snowfall rather narrow to the higher peaks and rather than any of the lower ones. But you know what? It's a start. And oops. All right, I lost the satellite loop. I got to reload it. The radar is fair. There's some stuff aloft in southeastern PA and northern Delaware that's coming into the dry air and falling apart. So I don't think there's any problem here, even though clouds are going to be increasing. But you've got a lot of rain going on right now from western Ohio through Indiana, Illinois, and back over to Iowa. And Joe, I think most of that is going to pass by north of, I guess we want to draw a line along Route 78, go in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and go north of there. That's who I think gets into some of the rain tonight, and I don't think it's going to be a whole lot. It'll be a bit more as you move up into New England because of where the warm front's going. But if you're from New York City on south, you're probably not going to see very much of rainfall, if any at all, during the overnight hours tonight.
Yeah, it looks like places south of the city and west of the city probably will be, for the most part, dry. And then we just simply wait for the next round of significant precipitation. I just took a look, Joe, at the FGen map just to see for where the best atmospheric energy, the best omega would be. And it's interesting, you were pointing out earlier about how it appeared to you that the heaviest winds, the worst of the storm would stay just out to sea off to the east. And the FGen would agree with you on that, that a lot of the energy actually gets wrapped up, if you will, around that approaching storm from the south later on Tuesday and Tuesday night. And then it kind of wraps back, and part of it comes over us again for later on Tuesday into Tuesday evening. But again, the worst of it in terms of atmospheric energy, in terms of maybe possible convection, for example, stays pretty well just off to our east out over the ocean.
Take a look at the on the satellite. The actual the actual low that's going to be driving all of this is still back pretty far out to the west. It's moving across Kansas right now, and this is one of those times. We often laugh when we look in the long range, where you have sometimes you look on the long range out 11 or 12 days, and it'll draw warm fronts about 1,100 miles long. Well, this is a pretty,
Right.
This is actually a fairly long warm front that's forming. And what's going to happen is it's going to go to the north, come to a grinding halt somewhere in upstate New York, and then as the low moves east, and thanks to the block and the negative NAO, and begins to redevelop here, that warm front's actually just going to rapidly sink southeastward and disappear as the primary low falls apart, the secondary low takes over. The only thing that's missing here, if this were a wintertime situation, it'd be very interesting to see how this would play with dealing with the added ingredient of cold air. But this is you're watching a block in functioning here, and this low would normally probably head up toward the Great Lakes, were it not for the fact that we have this large negative North Atlantic oscillation that's been this way since the end of September. And now, of course, take a look in the Pacific on the left side of the satellite loop. Look at this big arm of moisture. That was my English muffin. The big arm of moisture that's moved inland, and you can just catch on the corner there. Let me make sure it's on the screen. You should be able to see it there on the upper left. Look at that swirl that's out there in the Pacific. That's really impressive.
Yeah, and you see a lot more of those. And the funny thing, Joe, you alluded to at the very beginning of our show the winter outlook that came out from NOAA on Thursday. No surprises, by the way, because as I pointed out last week, I showed the previous month where they had that same December, January, February time frame, and showed where they were positioning the areas of above normal temperatures and above and below normal precipitation, and that almost precisely matched what they came out with in the upcoming winter outlook on Thursday. I found out also, what I find out is that on that day in that outlook, they say it doesn't look like there's going to be much hope of any kind of alleviation of the drought situation in the West, that it's going to be a rather dry winter. And on the same day that they made that pronouncement, on the very same day, that's when California and much of the West Coast was getting hit by a nasty surge of wind and rain. And I'm saying to myself, the average person who doesn't know much or doesn't really listen all that much to weather and long-range outlooks and whatnot, saying, well, there they go again. They said it was going to be dry for the upcoming winter season. Look what's happening out there, George. It's pouring down. What does that tell you, George? What did that that kind of thing? It was contrary. The long-range outlook was contrary to what was happening in many of the drought-stricken areas at that moment in time. And here you see that swirl, that wonderful graphic that you just brought up from the GOES West. And yeah, that is very impressive. You got to remember, this is not December or January when you see a lot of that. This is only October. And there you go with this swirl, this significant swirl of clouds, this dramatic comma-shaped effect, and part of the coast, and bringing additional rain, wind, and moisture to many of the areas, which again went many, many weeks without seeing a drop of rain.
Yeah. Well, I to be a little fair, the winter forecast doesn't really go into effect till December, but they certainly do.
December, right?
But they do certainly have the next several before the pattern. If the pattern stays the way it is, they're probably going to get more coming in. So maybe it reverts to a pattern in December that would favor it being very, relatively dry in the western part of the United States. But you got maybe, but until that happens, let the rains pour. Are you all right?
Excuse me. Yeah, I'm fine. I get these fits, these coughing. It's interesting how this all progressed. On Friday, I was getting sneezing fits. I was sneezing like 6 or 7 times in a row. And then yesterday I was getting these coughing fits. I just cough, cough, cough. I've been ODing on Luden's cough drops. NyQuil, DayQuil, any kind of quill you can get. I get my hands on.
Right,
Joe,
lunch quill, dinner quill.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and then the NyQuil is like you might as well just drink a bottle of whiskey and still, and wash it down. Wash down 2 Tylenol with a bottle of whiskey, and it's pretty much the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah, it sucks. It just sucks when you got a cold. I get it. Believe me. All right, let's look at the radar, by the way, out in the west. And a lot of rain moving now in from off the ocean into Washington, Oregon. Look at Northern California. You draw an east-west line from San Francisco to the Nevada state line and go northward. All of Northern California getting clobbered with rain at the moment. So that's our Friday system, or system for the end of the week. So we got this first player. By the way, there's also some showers and storms coming out of the Gulf of Mexico. I neglected to mention Hurricane Rick in the Pacific coming in along the coast of Mexico, but that stuff is just going to get left behind in the mountains with Rick. I didn't see how high the top winds got with that. Let me just really quick. I'll punch up the advisory and see what they're saying about it. But it doesn't appear like that rain. It's not like all that heavy rain is just going to go in and flood the southern and central plains. It's offshore. I guess they backed off from it becoming a major hurricane because top winds are only 85 miles an hour, moving north at 16.1 and 101.7 west. And let's see. Let's bring up the and of course on the Atlantic side, it's just absolutely shut down. We may go this, I don't think we've had an actual named storm that was named during this month. We may finish the month without having a named storm for the month of October, which, considering how busy it was before that, is really remarkable.
It is, and wouldn't it be funny if we went through all of October and then all of a sudden things suddenly cooked up again, and we had a couple in November to finish out the season? But right now, it looks dead out there.
Yeah. Barry Goldberg asked me if it's politically correct to say English muffin. Yeah, well, the other alternative is what I call it, a UK muffin. I mean, it's glorified toast and it tastes good and I like them. So that's what matters in my book. There's Rick's track coming inland and turning actually northwest, which is why it's not going to be any factor to any place else in the southern plains. Here's a surface map. We've got high pressure along the coast. There's your developing low in north central Kansas that is starting to push east. The warm front is actually being analyzed right into Kentucky, eastern Kentucky, which makes sense. And then tomorrow we'll see the later maps push that. You'll see that warm front getting analyzed a little bit further to the east as it pushes northward. And it is, by the way, that low is a 9. The low off the coast of Washington, Oregon, Joe. It's a 943 low.
Wow.
That's impressive. That is really impressive.
Let's see what the 3 kilometer NAM says about that.
I don't think it goes far enough west. I really don't. All right, so let's take a look at some of the models. Let's start with the new NAM because that came. Well, that reminds me, Joe. We only got 2 more weeks and we go on standard time, which is we'll be dancing in the streets here. So here's the new NAM, and we'll take you through on the surface. Here's the rain for tonight. Well, there it is. Let me just back it up here. And running across the rain, advancing through Ohio into western New York and western PA. This is at 8 o'clock tonight, so it's pretty far to the north and west. And you can see that first area really kind of goes up into upstate New York and into New England, north of New York City. And here we are tomorrow morning. We're actually in a warm sector here for part of the day. The low is right on the Indiana-Ohio border at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, or just east of there. And if you want to draw the warm front, I'm going to draw it just kind of like this, lying just north of New York City. And this is the area that SPC has got their severe weather risk for tomorrow. Which, again, I kind of think it's going to be I don't know, with the warm front as close as it is, it's not the most unstable atmosphere in the world up in our area we're talking about. Again, I'm thinking if there's some cells, they're going to be scattered and isolated. Meanwhile, off the southeast coast, that moisture that you saw in the Gulf of Mexico, that's actually a little low that forms right off the Georgia, right off the coast of Florida, east of Jacksonville. And that's your secondary low that's moving northward. The primary group weakens very rapidly Monday night. So now that warm front issue is all but gone because the coastal low takes over completely and deepens, and then just kind of sits there for at least a bunch of hours east of New Jersey, south of Nantucket, as a 977 low. If you look at the isobars on here, again, the tightest gradient is just offshore. So I would not expect, as we mentioned earlier, we're not expecting the stronger winds to move inland. And then here we are Wednesday morning. The low is still out there, but the problem for Wednesday, I think, is you got an onshore flow here. I don't know how much drying you're going to be able to get out of this. Maybe you'll luck out on Thursday. Thursday maybe turns out like today, where you got early sun and then arriving clouds. And then here comes the next one. And we'll bring up the GFS now so we can go beyond 84 hours. So, you know,
a lot of the low level moisture
is, yeah, that's going to have that's really going to have a tough time getting out of the way.
Right. You need something to really, like, carve that up or shift it out somehow. But I think you're right. I think a lot of that will remain in place even after the. That's the most frustrating thing of all, is that you might have the mid and upper levels may dry out very nicely, but unfortunately that low hanging schmutz, if I may use that term, just lingers or hangs on for the longest period of time and shuts out the sun for more or less much of the day. And that's what we may be looking at even after the storm itself pushes on by and off to the north and east.
Right. You squeeze in a drier day maybe on Thursday, but even here you're still getting isobars that are coming down from southeastern Canada. And of course, at this point now, you got the next low. And by the way, SPC in their, they had it yesterday. I'm going to go back to their map. I want to go to their day 4 to 8 because with the next system, the powerhouse that's coming into the Pacific coast now, so this is day 3, and day 3, they've got a large area of slight risk from central Texas northward into Kansas. They had it in their long range yesterday for days 4 and 5. So I'm imagining on day 4, yeah, they have a 15% or a slight risk on day 4 now, which is Wednesday into Thursday, from the eastern half of Louisiana, southern half of Mississippi, southern half of Alabama, small portion of southwest Georgia and the Florida Panhandle, and then after that they go predictability too low as the system gets along to the coast. So this is a bit with these storms. We're getting these late outbreaks of severe weather, and you can see it here. The low in Nebraska coming eastward, and a north-south area of rain and thunderstorms from Minnesota all the way down into Texas. Now, the second low, I don't think the second low, well, I'm kind of looking at this because of how it's lifting out, and the first low not quite getting out of the way. It looks like it wants to go underneath us, and then it just sort of, the upper low just sort of reforms, and you wind up with what looks like just a giant arm of heavy rain that sweeps up from the southeast and then lifts up into the northeast during Friday. And then the upper low doesn't get out of the way. So you, at least in the world of the GFS, it could have lingering rain or showers at least on Saturday, maybe less so next Sunday, but doesn't look good for the end of the week and the first part of next weekend, if this is correct.
What can I say? We're moving into the new month of November, which is well known as a month of rain and wind and unsettled conditions, and it looks like we're going to make that transition a bit early, starting with this system coming in on Tuesday, another one coming in for Halloween weekend, Joe, next weekend, and it may continue to persist this pattern right on into the new month of November.
Yeah, correct. Rainfall on the GFS, by the way, also not too shabby. They got a stripe of like 6 inches plus along the New Jersey coast and into touching, the south shore of Long Island there. But every bit of 3 to 4 inches just about everywhere. Uh, this is for the whole week. Spread out for the whole week. It's a good thing, actually a very good thing that we've been dry for the last month because this at least brings the flash flood thresholds up rather high. Uh, we wouldn't have. It's not like we were going into what happened with Ida, for example, when we had, the ground beyond saturated from all the rain from the weeks before.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Excuse me.
that's okay. And out west, also, you could see pockets here of 10 inches or more being generated by the GFS. Oddly enough, again, because of the fact that, remember, we talked about this last week, Canada has not been cold. There's not a whole lot of snow cover there. And as a result, there's really not much in the way of cold air. So you look at the amount of snow, yeah, okay, in the Rockies there, up in the central and northern Rockies, where you would expect it to happen, and also in the Sierra Nevadas. But I've seen, if there were more ample cold air around, you would certainly see a much larger area of snow out in the western part of the United States. And this is over the next 7 days. Not a whole lot, if any at all, as you go into the eastern half of Canada with regards to snow cover. But let's go look at the long range because a couple of important developments, in my view, have been occurring in the last 4 or 5 days on the models, and I'm going to go way upstairs to the stratosphere. And while the map is loading, just want to say thank you to Leon Probitsky, who just hit super chat on this Sunday morning. Thank you, Mr. Leon. So we'll wait for the polar vortex. And Joe, I don't know if you've been watching this. I've been watching this for the better part of the last 10 days. And it has been very consistent, and it's showing a rather important development here. So we start off with the polar vortex. This is for this coming Thursday. I rolled it up ahead a little bit, but you see the polar vortex there on the north coast of Siberia, and you've got, and this is way up in the stratosphere. You actually have a higher pressure that's over in the stratosphere over Nova Scotia. So all your cold air is really bottled up in Northern Europe and Western Europe and going back over into Siberia. But the vortex is now because of another attack of very warm air that comes across in Asia. And you see that darkening brown and orange there on the upper center of the picture. That is a warm disturbance, you might want to call it, that's moving through the upper atmosphere. And look at what happens to the polar vortex. It rotates around in a north-south elongated structure and starts dropping southward, which this is a big difference from what we were looking at maybe a week or so ago. But now all of a sudden you've got what looks like a pretty solid looking long wave trough at this level of the atmosphere running from the Arctic down to the Great Lakes. If you want to draw the axis of the trough, this could be an interesting development for maybe the second half of November. But if you're a winter weather lover, you have to be encouraged to see something like this.
It is almost as if the vortex itself is positioning itself by, let's say, the end of the first week of November, positioning itself to drop straight through the northern and central sections of Canada. And of course, the flow will be primarily out of a rather strong and gusty north-northwest direction across Western Canada and into the Plain States. Yeah, this could very well be a signal that by the time we get to the mid and latter part of November, things are going to be turning quite a bit colder across Canada and into parts of the northern tier of the United States.
Yep.
So who knows? We may have a big change in store by, let's say, Thanksgiving.
Right, or certainly, yeah, maybe right around the last week and a half, last 10 days of November, perhaps. Something to look ahead to. The other thing, now, I know what a lot of the weather people call the CFS model. I don't know if you know this, Joe, but the climate model, the CFS model, they usually refer to the CFS model as can't forecast and then the S word for poo-poo. Okay. So, and there's a reason for this, because the CFS model is horribly inconsistent. It'll show something for especially in their longer range. It'll show something for weeks at a time, and then suddenly it'll just flip to the complete opposite. And the one thing I did notice about the CFS model, but take it with a grain of salt, because it just did another flip. And on its recent runs, it is suddenly, back about a month or so ago, it was showing it to be colder for November, December, and January. Then it flipped to where it was showing it to be actually warmer for November, December, January, and going into March. Now it's flipped back again. It's got a much colder look to the upper air. I'm putting up, this is sort of the average upper air for the month. While it's still on the warmish side for November, we'll wait and see if that happens. But if the polar vortex change is real, any kind of change at the lower atmosphere won't happen until the latter part of the month anyway. But December now is a little colder. It's not crazy cold, but it's a little colder. But January is rather interesting. Suddenly, it's gone to a much colder look across at least the northern states. We're kind of on the borderline with respect to the jet stream, which is, if you're a snow lover, that's where you want to be. And even February, we're back to being just kind of on the borderline. So, a big salt mine worth of salt is what I would say. But the fact that the CFS, just the fact that it's changed, it seems to be reacting to whatever's going on with the polar vortex, that the GFS and a few of the other models have been showing lately, that maybe there's something to this. So we're definitely going to be paying attention to this. The other thing, by the way, that's important is the fact that we've been talking about the absolute lack of snow cover in North America, and I was looking at the animations yesterday. I'm just going to bring up the GFS, and then I'm going to try to pull up the snow cover animation. We'll do a little bit of long range here, but here we go. Let me just let's get the total snowfall. Again, this is sort of grain of salt forecasting here with regards to that. It's just a matter of we're not really looking at anything with regards to the specifics in terms of the numbers, but just the fact that it would be showing general snowfall would be a big plus. And also try to focus away from the blue. The bluish color is snow that is barely accumulates, but it's a little more sizable going over the next 2 weeks in North America, particularly in the western half of Canada. So it's important that we put down a solid snow cover. Also showing snow cover in southeastern Canada to an extent. And yes, if you've looked at the models over the yesterday and today, it was bound to happen sooner or later, Joe. Bringing a low up in the long range up the East Coast with snow not that far away. Wonderful to see it in fantasy land. But I would just kind of look at this and just say that, it's finally starting to show some snow cover, some potential snow cover growth in North America, which is really important that we get that underway for the snow season. And it's bringing up the snow cover maps of what we have down there so far. I mean, it is just really sorely lacking. I'm amazed it's as low as it is, but I'll bring the map up here. Let's give me a second. Let it give it a moment to load. And
you know what? 6 weeks from now, we'll be sitting here and either saying one of two things. Either one, isn't it amazing how 6 weeks ago there was hardly anything, and now look at the tremendous amount of snow that covers that same area, especially over central and northern Canada. We'll either be saying that, or we'll be saying, well, we saw this 6 weeks ago, and it looks like it's still being maintained now. and that doesn't spell a whole lot of hope for a lot of you snow lovers for the days and weeks to come. We'll be either saying one of both of those things.
I would have expected, I mean, if it's just a norm, I would think in a normal winter, you would see more snow cover than what you're seeing over North America at the moment. I mean, you have to go way up in Canada. You got to go north of 60 degrees north latitude to find any snow. There's no snow in Labrador, for God's sake. Even in northern Labrador, there's nothing.
Right.
And the stuff that's the stuff in the Rockies that fell a couple of weeks ago, I mean, that's all gone.
This time of the year, you begin one tip off is Labrador and also Newfoundland. They get a lot of snow, more snow in the eastern half of Canada than most anywhere else. And if you haven't seen much of any snow now, you got to begin to scratch your head and say, "Uh-oh, what does this mean for, the rest of the fall and into the beginning of winter?"
Now I've switched to the Siberia map, which actually in the last week there's been extensive growth of snow cover there. Even here it started out slow, but it seems to be catching up a bit. And the yellow, by the way, is ice. The effect of the polar vortex, if you remember from the map that we had up earlier, when we had the polar vortex up, the actual stratosphere low is sitting right over there where I've just drawn the circle. So this is where it's, you've got your brutal cold Siberian air developing, but it's no surprise that near where the polar vortex is, that you're seeing the ice actually expanding right to the coast. It's just almost completely closed off. Also, it's not that far offshore from the coast of Alaska, now getting very close to closing off there. But you would also see ice formations in Greenland. And here it's kind of struggling here, Joe, down the coast of Greenland. You see it's sort of pushing there, but not quite there. I noticed the ocean water temperatures up in the Atlantic up that way are actually running above normal. But ice is having trouble on the eastern flank here, which that makes sense considering the kind of pattern that we have.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how things change. But certainly, if that polar vortex does spin around and into the northern and western sections of Canada and begin to extend south and eastward down toward, let's say, the plains and the Great Lakes by mid-November, you will see some significant changes, rapid changes, as opposed to what is happening right now. Because right now, Joe, that high pressure ridge still dominates across much of Canada and will continue to remain dominant probably for another couple of more weeks. So don't look for much change to happen in the next couple of weeks. But once we move into November, things may start indeed changing.
Yep, there's your block sitting in western Hudson Bay. Here's your animal deep trough along and off the west coast. This is the short wave that is moving eastward. This is the map from overnight, by the way, 2 a.m. Sunday morning. That's the short wave that's going to be coming into the eastern part of the United States. You'll notice the blocking high just sits over Hudson's Bay, which forces all the energy off the mid-Atlantic coast, and you wrap up a cutoff. That blocking high is doing everything. The block across southern Hudson Bay there on Tuesday, just forcing all that energy underneath. And then it starts to weaken as we move toward the end of the week. It's still there. It's kind of pushing eastward, east of Hudson Bay into southeastern Canada in time for the next upper low, which actually looks even more vigorous than this one does. But that the blocking high starts to slide eastward with the upper low at the same time. So the upper low is not actually forced out underneath us, the second one, but lifts up just to our west. And then it opens up, and now, of course, the block is gone. The ridge starts to progress, and you've got a little vortex there, nice little vortex there that forms in Hudson Bay early next week. And for the first time in quite a while, if we follow the flow here, when you look at the 500 millibar jet stream map, if you follow the flow, early next week, we actually have a connection for the first time coming from northwest Canada and running down in through central Canada and in through the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley and turning into the eastern part of the U.S. So this would be after Halloween. I would expect it to be on the chilly side. Longer term, that lifts out, and you got more troughing coming into the east. You still have a negative NAO here, right through the next 2 weeks. So it's going to be very interesting to see where this goes in the next month or so and how the pattern evolves. I'm going to be very curious as to how this plays out. And the other thing to watch for, by the way, on the Pacific side, which is important, is if we start off with this deep trough in the west, that actually goes away, and you start to see a little right in here. This is next Saturday. You see it there. There's a nice trough at 180 degrees west. I'm sorry, 160 west, the longitude of Hawaii. And I always like to see troughs there if you want, because that puts the ridge up into northwest Canada. You get this negative EPO in a situation like this, which is what you need, the negative East Pacific Oscillation to make some cold air, and you're going to have it after the start of the month of November here for at least a little while up in that part of the of North America. So the EPO may actually be it may get into better shape as we go into the month of November, and for winter weather lovers, that would certainly help the cause here.
Yep, it sure would. I'm just looking at some of the comments on the chat board, and Brandon Doherty says, all of my followers just want a blizzard. I say, well, all it takes is 1 inch of snow, winds of above 35 miles an hour, and temperatures in the 20s for 3 hours of minimum. It's true. A lot of people think, Joe, when they hear the word blizzard, they think of a ton of snow falling. You don't need a ton of snow. You just need a small amount being thrown about by a strong gusty wind to knock the visibilities down to near zero, whiteout type conditions for a sustained period of time, a few hours, and you've got yourself a blizzard. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a lot of snow, but there is enough to cause problems if you have to get from one place to another.
Right.
As my voice and my nose continues to clog.
Yeah. John Charles says, I think the negative NAO won't be as consistent once the pattern changes over the next month. Well, the NAO is one of the more volatile of the teleconnections, and the fact that it's been negative since the end of September would sort of argue that after 5 or 6 weeks that it would at least go back to the neutral line. But I would also point out that there are instances, and it doesn't happen very often. If you look back at the winters of 2009, 2010, and 2010, 2011, you had the NAO negative for literally months. So it'll probably, odds are that it will not stay negative forever. It definitely won't stay negative forever. At some point, it will change. But if we're in some sort of a cycle where the change means that it only barely gets to positive and then goes back negative again, then that might carry forward. So there's a lot of variables here to look at. I think there's a lot to like. If you're a winter weather lover, I think there's a lot to like in the recent model runs in the longer range. Now, whether we're sitting here a week from now saying the same thing remains to be seen. That we'll have to just hold off on, and we'll wait for a week from now and see where the models are taking us then. So you got a cold, Mr. Rayo. We've been at it for an hour. So why don't we wrap it up? I don't have a Briller Jeopardy, but maybe you do. But why don't we save that for tomorrow? Maybe when you're feeling better, we can have a little more fun with it.
Sounds good to me, Joe.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll be back in the gloom and doom beginning tomorrow at 7:30.
Yeah, 7:30 tomorrow night, folks. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Michael McGuire, Leon Probitsky, Brandon Doherty, all super chat hitters today. Thank you very much. Most appreciated. And feel better, Joe. We will see you tomorrow, folks. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.